Our identity consists of a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is in a relay of energy, a relationship with the surrounding cultural and natural ecology. Our identity is initially a curse and a gift. It consists of the pattern in the family lineage supported, handed down by the cult or culture, and it is the default mode. Unless we do something through the antithesis of adolescence to rebel against and change our patterns, we continue in some variation of our family and cultural system. The pattern is there to hold 99% of our way of being. The identity, or pattern, is a loop. Most of our thoughts are on autopilot. Most of our feelings coming from those thoughts, most of our actions coming from those thoughts and feelings, all of our habits, most of our ways of being, our ways of breathing, our way of speaking, the language we speak, the clothes we wear, the things we eat, the place we live, the place we work. Most of that is on autopilot for the simple reason that the conscious mind is incapable of digesting a wide spectrum and chaotic series of patterns coming in all directions, on all dimensions, and responding to that in a given moment. So much like a single performer in many of the looping protocols that a musician will use to sing, if you look at someone like Frank Zappa, who sings all the lyrics, plays all the instruments, what's done is one track is carefully worked out and then put on a loop and played. The next track is carefully worked out and complementary and put on a loop and played. The next track, the next track, the next track, and there may be 10 or 11 tracks for a given song, and then the last song may be the solo or the variation. The last track then is played live. And life is a lot like that. We put our breathing on track. We put our dominant thoughts and beliefs on a track, our feelings on a track. So most of life is going forward, having once been considered by either our ancestors or us. It is now in a loop. And what remains is a very, very small sliver, an area of attention that we can turn towards and iterate, develop, be aware of. Now, this pattern, like all patterns in relationship with a series of ecologies, in relationship to all the patterns around us, exists within several paradigms. One is the law of mass, the sociopathic paradigm that says that when a small energy, an individual, collides with a large energy, a group, an institution, a country, a culture, that much like a pinball in relationship to a bowling ball, the individual will be knocked traumatically or empathically into a different trajectory, much like the pinball that collides with the bowling ball. But the bowling ball the group, the cult or culture, continues in its trajectory, right, with no variation. The law of mass says that when a small energy and a large energy collide, the large energy prevails. And so we need identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is strong enough within our ecology to not get knocked off course too many times a day, and is not traumatized and shattered too many times a year, such that it falls apart. Because it's overwhelming for the I, the sense of ego, that holds on to the identity, the I that identifies with the pattern, can go through that pattern, can maintain the pattern in automatic mode. But the I is incapable of restructuring in a single moment one's way of breathing, one's way of eating, one's way of speaking, one's core religious beliefs, one's financial beliefs, one's cultural norms. You know, the idea of shaking hands rather than picking noses is the way of saying hello. All of these default modes within the cult, the norms, are too big to rethink in a single moment. Now, it's important to understand that the function of identity that we identify with is to free up the space for reflection, for meditation, for iteration, for redesign in a narrow portion by having most of it on autopilot that is beyond the ability of the I or ego to manage simultaneously. We just can't multitask. We can't manage our breath and manage a philosophical thought and cook dinner and figure out our core beliefs all at the same time. We have to do one after another after another. We can download them simultaneously and biologically, which is the gift and curse of our cult, our culture, and our parents. And we can download them unconsciously before we have language. And yet it's useful to understand that no word, no belief, no dogma, no pattern is absolutely correct. In other words, there is an inefficiency, a lie, a distortion, an imperfection, a flaw in every single pattern that can be conceptualized with language, right? And we can see that pattern if we look at any of the languages. Like we can say, for example, with what we do with words, we take the one, the whole, the uninterrupted ecology, and we compartmentalize the whole into language. We take the ecological one and we cut it up into the illusion of bits with words. So this body is an ecology. Every single part of this body affects the other parts of the body. And most of this body is completely interdependent. Right? We can call this a finger through the illusion of language, but when this finger does what finger does, it's actually connected to the heart. If the heart was not pumping blood, this couldn't happen. If the brain was not firing synapses, this couldn't happen. Right? So we call this a finger. And by doing so, we create a mental illusion that this is a separate thing from the hand, a separate thing from the arm, a separate thing from the body. That this is a finger and this is the heart. Right? But that is an illusion. We say this is the head. But of course, if you remove the head, the heart stops working. Right? So how are they separate? Right? And if you remove the planet, the body stops working. Right? Take the planet away, put the body out into empty space, and the body stops working. Take away the body and the finger stops working. Take away the solar system, the planet stops working. So you have these interconnected ecological frameworks that are isolated with the illusion and delusion of words. And the words make relatively random compartmentalizations that aren't real. And then we string together our consciousness, our meanings, out of those illusions called words. The words are not real. When I say finger, finger is a sound that is not a finger. And the sound is a symbol of letters. But they are also not a finger. Right? So the sound is symbolizing text, and the text is symbolizing an idea. But the idea is not a finger. So we're 3 levels into delusion. We've got a sound that is symbol for words, and we've got words that are symbols for an idea, and not one of them has anything to do with a finger. And the idea of a finger does not have anything to do with a finger. The idea that this is this separate thing is completely false. So it's useful to understand that the building block for our conscious understanding of reality is at least 4 levels deep in delusion, in illusion. Right? And then as we try and reorganize the meanings, the symbolic meanings of all those sounds and letters, and create figments of imagination, which are also not what is being imagined. Meaning, imagining a finger is not a finger. Right? So we're dealing in this realm of illusion and delusion. And then we take these things and we sequence them. We say this will be the first word, this will be the second word, this will be the third word, this will be the fourth word, and that creates a synergistic delusion or illusion. Right? Now, the core of identity, the core that the ego, the I, attaches itself to, is an idea. So the idea, resting on language, creates feelings based on what is imagined with that language. Those thoughts, those feelings produce actions. I say, I have an idea. I think it would be nice to have a cup of tea. Would it be nice to have a cup of tea? Who knows? What does nice mean? We're deep into illusion. But based on that thought, I have a feeling that says, yes, that feels good, a cup of tea, right? And then based on that, I move my body, I heat the kettle, I get a tea bag, I sip, and I create with that thought, with that feeling, with that action, a way of being. That's the identity, right? If we instead say, rather than it would be good to have a cup of tea, it would not be good We just resequence the word. A different identity emerges, a different pattern. Now, nothing like this is even deeper into illusion and delusion. If you take away all the words that we use in our language, we come to realize that there have been more than 10,000 different languages, most of which are now extinct. And those were cults that sliced the world up in different ways, right? Had a different slant, right? Some of them were very dense in certain areas and very open in others. Others of them just missed words entirely because it wasn't part of their idea, right? Every cult has sliced the world up in different ways and used those words to create thought, to create images, right? And so what these linguistic models, what these symbols are maps through which to understand, through which to bring certain patterns to consciousness. And this is done in the framework within which it is impossible to think a thought or have a conscious image without language. Meaning you are incapable of framing a single simple thought without the crutch of language, which, as we've already looked at, is 3 or 4 levels deep in illusion, in delusion. That what we're actually seeing, conceptualizing, being conscious of is not reality, but our model of reality. Now, our model of reality, our map of reality, is like Google Maps, right? So Google Maps, we have a grid of streets and cross streets. And so we're here. And so Google Maps tells us to head up here and then turn a right here and then stop right here, right? And as such, it is, if that's where we want to go, it is an effective map. Meaning if the map can take us where we want to go, it is an effective map. But only a fool would look at the map on your phone and say, that's the street, right? We're dealing deep in illusion again. It's a map of reality that hopefully corresponds with some part of reality, but it isn't reality. And so we come up, we take a right at Haight Street, we stop here, right? But where are the pine cones on this map? We just passed 3 pine trees filled with pine cones. Where are the pine cones on this map? They don't exist. In other words, the map is always a greatly dumbed down version of reality. When we say, my finger, where are the subatomic particles? Are they going this way or that way? How fast a second? How many subatomic particles are in the finger? Where are the pine cones? They're not in that map of reality. Now, the subatomic activity of a single finger for a single minute could take a lifetime to put into language. This subatomic particle went off at a 33-degree angle by 1/millionth of a millimeter in 1/millionth of a second, and then it went back, right? Well, if something is moving back and forth at a millionth of a second, and you're describing the movement at 1 second intervals, like it went here, then it went there, then it went there, then it went there. So if you're describing a movement at the rate of one movement a second, and you're describing something that's moving 1,000,000 times a second, you can't keep up with a single subatomic particle in a single atom, in a single molecule of your finger for the rest of your life. That's how behind you are. In other words, the use of language, which dumbs this whole complex process of billions and billions of subatomic particles in a single finger, what dumbs that down to say finger is illusion. So the words are incorrect. The framework is incorrect. They're incomplete. We only see on a very limited number of dimensions. We only see on one dimension in a very narrow spectrum of light. But what about the light that is present faster and slower than the eye's ability to measure? We don't even know what's going on there, let alone have a map for it. So we need and are given identity, a pattern that our ego identifies with. That pattern is built upon layer upon layer upon layer of illusion. It's also, in its articulated form, less than 1% of the reality that it represents. Google Maps does not tell you how many pine cones were in the last tree. It doesn't tell you where the last bird shat on the branch. It doesn't tell you how many dewdrops are on the pine needles or how many needles there were, either on the tree or on the ground. It doesn't tell you the density of the soil. It doesn't tell you that the family of hedgehogs has just had children. It doesn't tell you how old the children are. It doesn't tell you the nature of the rocks that are in the sandy gravel, or their age, or anything at all. This map of Google simply tells you the general angle of the streets and their names, which have nothing to do with the actual street. The streets don't look like those white lines, and the names are just fantasies for the purpose of getting around. Right? There's nothing real about Haight Street. It's just a series of sounds and symbols that we made up and agreed to assign to something. So we need identity. We need a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. That pattern creates a map of reality that expresses less than 1% of reality and is 4 levels deep in illusion. It's not real. It is a simulation. It's a crude simulation. It's a butchered simulation. And it is 100% wrong. But it can be useful. You need a useful map of reality, and it needs to be strong enough to maintain its identity, its pattern, so that it doesn't shatter and put you in trauma, so that you can focus your mind on other areas, on areas that you're iterating, that you're creating new illusions, if you will. You need an ego, an I, to maintain and identify with the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that are all deeply flawed. But you need those maps, those thoughts, those actions to be heading in the general direction of survival, security, love and belonging, the fulfillment of your human needs, even if they're wrong. Meaning, if your map is 99% flawed, doesn't even tell you how many blades of grass you just passed in the recent lawn, but it gets you to where you need to go to pick up a paycheck that buys you food to survive, then it's a good map. Then your ego is doing its job. So there's a paradox. You need an ego built largely on lies and emissions, steeped in delusion, that generally takes you in the direction that you want to go to fulfill your human needs. And you need 99% of your life delegated to that ego to maintain those identities, those cycles, those patterns, so that what remains of your conscious mind is free to create new illusions, new delusions, new fantasies, new dreams that aren't real, of course. When you're planning goals, the goals are not real, right? The present moment is real, but we don't relate directly with the present moment. We relate to it through these 4 layers of illusion, through language, through the conscious mind. So this is the paradox that we must navigate in order to suffer or thrive, in order to survive.